Imagine discovering a tiny golden object created more than 1,000 years ago, long before modern aviation existed, and at first glance it looks strangely familiar. It has a streamlined body, wide wings extending from its sides, and a raised structure at the back that resembles the tail fin of a modern aircraft. It was not found inside a laboratory or a science fiction story. It came from the ancient lands of Colombia, created by skilled goldsmiths whose civilization disappeared centuries before airplanes ever touched the sky. So what exactly were these mysterious golden figures? Were they simply artistic representations of animals and spirits? Or do they reveal something about how ancient people imagined flight? Today, we are exploring the fascinating mystery behind the ancient Colombian gold figurines that continue to spark curiosity and debate around the world. Deep in the mountains and river valleys of what is now Colombia, ancient communities developed one of the most impressive traditions of gold craftsmanship in the Americas. Among these cultures was the Quimbaya civilization, a society known for extraordinary metalworking skills and artistic creativity. They lived in a region filled with forests, rivers, and diverse wildlife, and they transformed the resources around them into beautiful objects that reflected their beliefs, traditions, and connection with nature. Their craftsmanship continues to be admired centuries after their civilization disappeared. The Quimbaya were not simply collecting gold because it was valuable. For them, gold represented power, spirituality, and a connection between the human world and the supernatural. Their craftsmen created ceremonial objects, jewelry, containers, and figures using advanced techniques that required incredible patience and precision. One of the methods they mastered was the lost wax casting process, a technique that allowed artists to create detailed shapes by forming a wax model, covering it with clay, melting away the wax, and filling the empty space with molten metal. This process gave them the ability to produce remarkably detailed works of art. The results were remarkable. Many Quimbaya artifacts show animals that are easy to recognize. There are frogs, birds, insects, and other creatures from their environment. Their artists had the ability to capture natural forms with impressive detail. A frog could clearly look like a frog. A bird could clearly look like a bird. Their understanding of shapes, symbolism, and artistic design was highly developed, making their work some of the finest examples of ancient American craftsmanship. But among these discoveries were several small golden objects that caught the attention of modern observers for a very different reason. Some of these figures appear to have features that remind people of aircraft. Their bodies seem smooth and elongated, their wings appear fixed and symmetrical, and some have a vertical piece at the rear that resembles a stabilizing fin found on airplanes. These unusual characteristics have made the figurines one of the most discussed artifacts associated with the Quimbaya culture. For many people who see these objects for the first time, the resemblance is difficult to ignore. The shape seems strangely close to something created by modern engineering. The question immediately appears, how could ancient people create something that looks similar to a machine that would not exist for another 1,000 years? That question has fascinated researchers, historians, and curious visitors for decades. This mystery has led to many different interpretations. One explanation comes from archaeologists and historians who study ancient art. They suggest that these objects were never meant to represent machines. Instead, they were likely symbolic versions of animals, especially creatures connected to water, insects, or mythical beings. Ancient artists often simplified natural forms, and a stylized animal can sometimes look similar to a modern object simply because humans recognize familiar patterns. From this perspective, the unusual appearance reflects artistic style rather than advanced technology. This idea is known as pareidolia, the tendency of the human brain to find familiar shapes in unclear images. It is the same reason people see faces in clouds or shapes in shadows. Since modern society is surrounded by airplanes, rockets, and advanced technology, our minds naturally compare unusual shapes to things we already understand. As a result, people may notice similarities that were never intended by the original artist. From this perspective, the golden figures may not be evidence of ancient aircraft knowledge. They may simply be examples of creative ancient symbolism expressed through unique artistic design. However, supporters of the aircraft interpretation point to certain details that they believe deserve attention. They argue that the shape is not just generally similar to an airplane. They focus on specific features, such as the placement of the wings, the smooth body design, and especially the upright structure at the back. To them, these details make the figurines stand out from more traditional representations of animals found in ancient artwork. In modern aircraft, a vertical stabilizer helps control movement and maintain balance during flight. Some people believe the presence of a similar feature on these ancient objects is too specific to be ignored. They question why an ancient artist would create a shape resembling an aircraft instead of producing a clearer animal form, especially when Quimbaya artists were capable of creating recognizable creatures. To them, the combination of the smooth body, symmetrical wings, and upright rear section makes these figurines especially unusual. This debate has continued for decades because both sides raise interesting points. Each interpretation attempts to explain the same artifact, yet they arrive at very different conclusions based on the available evidence. The ancient world was filled with symbols whose original meanings have been lost. Many cultures created objects that represented ideas, myths, and spiritual beliefs that are difficult for modern people to fully understand. A symbol that seems mysterious today may have been completely obvious to the people who created it. Without written explanations, even familiar-looking objects can become difficult to interpret. Imagine finding a modern logo thousands of years in the future, after the meaning behind it had disappeared. Someone might interpret it completely differently because they would not have the cultural background needed to understand it. The same challenge exists when studying ancient artifacts. Historians often have to rely on context, comparison, and careful analysis rather than complete certainty. The Quimbaya gold figures may have represented animals, spirits, supernatural beings, or ideas connected with movement and transformation. Perhaps they were inspired by creatures that lived in the environment around them. Perhaps they represented something from mythology that has been forgotten. The truth is that we do not have written explanations from the people who created them. As a result, much of the discussion remains open to interpretation. This lack of information is what makes the object so fascinating. The gold survived, but the story behind it did not. The craftsmanship remained, while the original meaning slowly disappeared with time. Another important detail is that the Quimbaya were not the only ancient people fascinated by unusual shapes and flight. Across many cultures, humans have looked toward the sky and imagined beings, creatures, and objects capable of traveling through the air. Birds, insects, and celestial symbols appear repeatedly in ancient artwork around the world. Flight has always represented freedom, power, and a connection with the unknown. It is a theme that has inspired human imagination throughout history. So perhaps the real mystery is not whether the Quimbaya built ancient aircraft. Perhaps the deeper question is why humans have always been fascinated by the idea of leaving the ground. The dream of flight has existed long before modern technology made it possible. The golden figurines remind us that ancient civilizations were not simple or primitive. They were creative, intelligent societies capable of extraordinary craftsmanship. They observed nature, developed complex techniques, and created art that continues to challenge and inspire people thousands of years later. Their achievements show a deep understanding of materials, design, and artistic expression. Whether these objects resemble airplanes because of coincidence, artistic imagination, or something we do not yet fully understand, they reveal something important about the people who made them. They show curiosity, creativity, and a desire to capture ideas in a permanent form. That alone makes them valuable pieces of human history. The mystery remains because the past does not always give us complete answers. Sometimes it leaves behind small clues and invites us to ask better questions. Every discovery has the potential to reveal something new while also creating fresh mysteries. When you look at these ancient golden figures, you are not just looking at a strange object. You are looking at a message from a civilization that vanished long ago, a message shaped by human hands, preserved through centuries, and still powerful enough to make people wonder. Few artifacts continue to inspire as much discussion from such a small piece of gold. Maybe the greatest mystery is not what these objects look like to us today. Maybe the greatest mystery is what they meant to the people who first created them. What did they see when they shaped these pieces of gold? What story were they trying to preserve, and what ideas were important enough for them to transform into something that would survive for more than 1,000 years? Those are the questions that continue to keep the mystery alive. Those questions may never have simple answers, but perhaps that is exactly why these ancient golden figures continue to capture our imagination. They remind us that history is not only about what we know, it is also about the mysteries that remain waiting to be discovered, explored, and understood.